You know what's supposed to be special about birthdays? The feeling that for one day you matter just a little bit more to the people you care about. That they've set aside time to celebrate you, to make you feel valued, to remind you that you're important in their world. But sometimes the universe has other plans. Sometimes your birthday becomes the day everything you believed in shatters into pieces you'll spend months trying to pick up. This is a true story, shared on Reddit, by a man whose birthday became the worst day of his life. And it all started so innocently. So, normally. He'd been with his girlfriend for about 2 years. Not an incredibly long relationship by some standards, but long enough to feel solid. Long enough to start imagining a future. Long enough to trust someone completely. They'd moved in together, built routines, shared friends, talked about plans. She knew his family, he knew hers. They were, by all accounts, a real couple with a real life together. His birthday was approaching, and like many people, he wasn't making a huge deal out of it. Just another year, right? But his girlfriend insisted they should do something nice. Maybe dinner at that restaurant he'd been wanting to try. Maybe invite a few friends over. Nothing extravagant, just something to mark the occasion. The day itself started normally enough. She seemed a bit distracted that morning, maybe a little distant, but nothing that set off alarm bells. People have off days. People get stressed. He didn't think much of it. She said she had some errands to run, some things to take care of before they could celebrate later. Perfectly reasonable. He told her to take her time, that he'd just relax at home, maybe catch up on some shows, enjoy the lazy birthday morning vibe. And that's exactly what he did. For a while, anyway. Here's where the story takes its turn. That moment when your entire reality shifts and nothing will ever quite be the same again. He was at home, alone, scrolling through his phone like we all do when we have nothing pressing to do. Social media, messages, maybe some news. And then he noticed something. Her laptop was open on the coffee table. She'd left in a hurry that morning, probably forgot to close it. The screen had gone dark, but it wasn't locked. Now, he wasn't the type to snoop, never had been, trusted her completely. But something caught his eye as he walked past. A notification had popped up on the screen, a message preview, and the name attached to it. It wasn't someone he recognized. More importantly, the preview of the message itself was intimate, too intimate, the kind of message you don't send to a casual friend or a coworker. His heart started racing. That sick feeling in your stomach when you know something's wrong, but you're desperately hoping you're misunderstanding. He sat down, woke up the screen, and what he found destroyed him. Messages, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, back and forth between his girlfriend and another man. A married man, he'd later learn. And these weren't innocent conversations. These were love messages, plans to meet, explicit details about their encounters, references to times they'd been together, inside jokes, pet names, all the little intimacies that should have been reserved for him. As he scrolled through the messages, his hands shaking, the timeline became clear. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a drunken slip-up at a party that she immediately regretted. This had been going on for months. Months! While they'd been living together. While they'd been making plans. While he'd been completely oblivious. Trusting her, loving her, building what he thought was a solid relationship. The messages went back at least 4 months. 4 months of lies. 4 months of her telling him she loved him while loving someone else. 4 months of her being physically intimate with both of them.
The betrayal wasn't just that she'd cheated. It was the scale of the deception. The double life she'd been living with such apparent ease. And it was his birthday. Of all the days to discover this, it had to be the one day that's supposed to be about feeling loved and valued. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could have waited, could have taken time to process, to think through his response, to prepare himself emotionally. But he couldn't. The rage, the hurt, the sheer disbelief, it all came flooding out. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He called her. She answered cheerfully, asking if he wanted her to pick something up while she was out.
He cut through the pleasantries immediately. "I know about him," he said. Just 4 words, but they carried the weight of everything. There was silence on the other end, that specific silence that confirms guilt before a single word is spoken. Then she started talking, fast, defensive, a flood of explanations that somehow made everything worse. She didn't deny it, couldn't really, given the evidence. But her response was something he never could have anticipated. She didn't apologize, didn't express remorse, didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, she got angry at him for going through her messages, angry that he'd invaded her privacy, as if the violation of reading her laptop compared in any way to the violation of their entire relationship. And then she said something that would haunt him for months. "I don't see it as cheating because we're in love." Let that sink in for a moment. She didn't see it as cheating because they were in love. As if love somehow exempts you from the basic rules of decency and commitment. As if the depth of her feelings for this other man somehow erased the promises she'd made, the life she'd built, the person she'd been lying to every single day. She tried to explain.
The other man, the one she'd been seeing, was married, had kids. But according to her, they'd fallen in love. Real love. The kind you can't fight. The kind that apparently justifies betraying everyone around you, including your partner and his wife and children. She wanted him to understand, to see that this wasn't just some cheap affair. This was real, meaningful, special. She seemed genuinely confused as to why he was so upset. In her mind, she'd found something genuine with this married man, and that somehow made it acceptable, noble even. He was speechless. How do you argue with logic that twisted? How do you make someone understand that love doesn't give you permission to destroy other people's lives? That commitment means something? That you don't get to rewrite the rules just because you've developed feelings for someone else? He told her to come home. They needed to talk in person. She did, but the conversation went nowhere. She was defensive, he was hurt and angry, and there was no middle ground. She kept insisting that he didn't understand, that if he could just see how much she loved this other man, he'd realize this wasn't really about hurting him. But it was about hurting him. It was entirely about hurting him. Every lie, every secret meeting, every time she'd come home from being with the other man and pretended everything was normal, all of it was about hurting him, whether she wanted to admit it or not. The relationship was over, that much was clear, but he had one more card to play. One more move that would ensure at least some small measure of justice in this completely unjust situation. He knew the married man's name now, had seen it in the messages, and he did what many people in his situation might consider, but few actually follow through with. He found the man's wife and told her everything. Some people would call this vindictive, petty revenge, unnecessary escalation. But from where he stood, it was simply the truth. This woman deserved to know that her husband had been having an affair, just like he'd deserved to know about his girlfriend's betrayal. Information that affects your life, your health, your future. You have a right to that information, don't you? He found her on social media, sent her a message, explained who he was and what had been happening, attached screenshots of some of the messages as proof, because he knew she'd need to see evidence. He wasn't cruel about it. He was direct, factual, and sympathetic. They were both victims of the same 2 people. They deserved to know the truth. The response was immediate. The married man's wife was devastated, shocked, but also grateful that someone had finally told her what was going on. Apparently, there had been signs, little things that didn't quite add up. But she'd trusted him, just like our narrator had trusted his girlfriend. Now they both knew better. The explosion that followed was spectacular. The married man tried to deny everything at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. His wife confronted him with the screenshots. There was no way out. His marriage imploded within days.
Divorce proceedings started almost immediately. And the girlfriend? She was furious. Absolutely furious. Not at herself for the cheating, not at the married man for lying to his family, but at our narrator for ruining everything, for exposing the affair, for telling the wife. She accused him of being vindictive, cruel, unable to let her be happy. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. She'd betrayed him on his birthday, lied to him for months, and somehow he was the villain for telling the truth. The mental gymnastics required to arrive at that conclusion were truly Olympic level. She moved out within a week, took her things, blocked him on everything, and disappeared into whatever life she thought she'd build with the married man.
Except that life wasn't going to happen anymore. Because he was in the middle of a messy divorce, dealing with custody battles, facing the financial and emotional wreckage of his destroyed family. Suddenly the romance didn't seem quite so romantic anymore. The story didn't end there. Over the following weeks and months, he posted updates on Reddit as the situation continued to unfold. And what unfolded was almost poetic in its justice. The married man, it turned out, wasn't interested in continuing the affair once it became public. The thrill was gone. The secrecy that had made it exciting had evaporated. Plus, he was dealing with divorce proceedings, angry family members, and a severely damaged reputation. He wanted nothing to do with the girlfriend anymore. She tried to stay in touch with him, sent him messages, called him, showed up at his workplace. But he'd moved on. Or maybe he'd never really been as invested as she thought. Either way, she found herself completely alone. The boyfriend she'd betrayed wanted nothing to do with her. The married man she'd fallen in love with had ghosted her. Her friends, many of whom had been mutual friends with our narrator, had taken his side once they learned what happened. She ended up with no one, which, according to our narrator, was exactly what she deserved. For him, the healing process was long and painful. Birthdays would never quite be the same. That day that's supposed to be about celebration and joy would forever be tinged with the memory of betrayal. But he worked through it. Therapy helped. Time helped. And the knowledge that he'd done the right thing, that he'd told the truth even when it was difficult, that helped too. The Reddit community overwhelmingly supported him. Thousands of comments expressing sympathy, sharing similar experiences, validating his decision to inform the married man's wife. Some people thought he'd gone too far, That he should have just ended his relationship and moved on. But most understood. Most agreed that the wife deserved to know. That keeping that secret would have made him complicit in the ongoing betrayal. He learned some hard lessons from the experience. That trust is fragile. That love doesn't excuse bad behavior. That sometimes people you think you know completely are capable of things you never imagined. And that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Looking back, he realized there had been signs. Small things he'd dismissed at the time. Nights when she'd been too tired for intimacy. Weekends when she'd had work obligations that took hours longer than they should have. Her phone constantly face down on the table. Little changes in behavior that individually meant nothing, but collectively painted a picture he'd refused to see. We do that sometimes, don't we? We ignore the red flags because we want so badly for everything to be okay. Because confronting the truth would mean dealing with pain and loss and uncertainty. So we tell ourselves stories, we rationalize, we explain away the inconsistencies until the day when we can't anymore, until the truth forces itself into our awareness, whether we're ready or not. His birthday became that moment of forced awareness, the day when denial was no longer possible, the day when he had to face what his relationship really was, a facade, a comfortable lie he'd been living while she built something else with someone else. In his final update, several months after the initial discovery, he shared that he was doing okay. Not great, but okay. He'd moved to a new apartment, started focusing on himself, reconnected with hobbies he'd neglected.
The wounds were healing, slowly. He'd even started dating again, cautiously, with walls that weren't there before, but that felt necessary for now.
The girlfriend reached out once more, months after everything fell apart. A long message apologizing, saying she'd been confused, that she'd made terrible choices, that she understood now how badly she'd hurt him. She wanted him to know she'd learned from the experience and hoped he was doing well. He didn't respond. What was there to say? The apology came months too late, after she'd lost everything, after she'd realized that the married man wasn't going to leave his wife for her, after she'd destroyed multiple lives in pursuit of something that turned out to be nothing at all. Some lessons, he figured, you have to learn on your own, and she'd learned hers the hard way. So what do we take from this story? What lesson emerges from the wreckage of a relationship destroyed by selfishness and lies? Maybe it's this: love isn't enough. Feelings aren't enough. You can love someone deeply and still hurt them terribly. You can have intense feelings for someone and still act in ways that are fundamentally wrong. Love doesn't give you permission to betray. It doesn't excuse deception. It doesn't justify destroying other people's lives in pursuit of your own happiness. And when you discover betrayal, you're not obligated to protect the people who betrayed you. You're not required to keep their secrets. You're not the villain for telling the truth, even when that truth causes pain. Because the pain was always there. You didn't create it. You just revealed it. This man discovered his girlfriend's infidelity on what should have been a happy day. His birthday became the day everything changed. But in a way, it was also the day he saved himself from wasting more time on someone who didn't value him. The day he learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to necessary endings, that sometimes pain is the price we pay for truth. He'll never forget that birthday. How could he? But maybe, eventually, he'll see it not as the day everything fell apart, but as the day he started building something better, something real, something honest. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the comfortable lies we tell ourselves, not the illusions we maintain to avoid pain, but the truth. Messy and painful and difficult as it might be, the truth.